Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We're in that period of the year where there's not a huge amount of international cricket on. We'll have a dedicated county championship section to each show with an extra focus on how England players of interest are doing. We'll do a little bit on each show on the IPL, and we'll normally have something a little bit different in each episode, either an interview, a special guest, or like in today's show where we pick an 11. We'll be picking our County Championship Uncapped 11 of the 21st century towards the end of this week's episode. I'm Yas Rana, and with me this morning is the Editor-in-Chief of Wisden Cricket Monthly, Phil Walker, the Magazine Editor of Wisden Cricket Monthly, Joe Harman, and the Managing Editor of Wisden.com, Ben Gardner. Let's start with the County Championship that started last week. Joe, your moment of the week is from that. What is it?
It was Hampshire, who I tipped for the title, who have got off to a very good start, thumped Somerset by an innings and plenty. They've got a really good side. They're actually playing over my right-hand shoulder against Surrey right now.
Getting spanked.
What's the score?
40 odd for naught.
40 odd for naught.
Having inserted them as well.
Having inserted them, yeah.
On a green one.
But they had a good first week, though.
Yeah, we're focusing on the last game. It just struck me as well, looking at some of the lineups around the country. Lots of teams are waiting for their overseas stars to arrive, or England players weren't quite available. Hampshire basically had their first choice 11 ready to go. They had Abbas and Abbott there ready. Vince made a few. You've got that Ben Brown, we've talked about before, as an excellent new signing. But then they've got these batters who are kind of, I guess, what's the way of putting it politely? Sort of your mediocre county batters who you hope, if you're going to win the championship, they're going to be needing to average kind of maybe even 33, 34, something like that will get them over the line. And in that first game, Joe Weatherly scores a big ton, and Ian Holland scored 80 odd, I think it was. So if those two players can come to the party, Vince is going to score runs. The only caveat there, does he get picked for England? And then you've got this gun bowling attack with Mason Crane ready to come into the side when the pitches are turning. And the seamers are going to take plenty in whatever conditions. So I think they're looking good. So much so that I put a teeny little bet on them this morning as well.
I find it interesting that even when we talk about county cricket, no one ever talks about Liam Dawson. Liam Dawson's obviously very good as well. I guess the only thing on Hampshire's win is that Somerset side looked pretty weak. Not that long ago, they were regularly favourites, or one of the favourites of the county championship this season. You think they'll probably be in the relegation battle unless something changes. Yeah,
well, it was a continuation of their batting slump, which wasn't great at any point last year, but really tailed off at the end of last season when they ended up in the first tier.
They look a lot stronger this week, don't they?
That's true.
They brought back Leach, Overton, Renshaw, the Aussie left-hander.
Renshaw's massive.
Davies come back as well.
Renshaw's
and Gregory as well. So they brought 4 internationals back into the side.
Renshaw's the key, though. I think that their bowling attack is pretty good, even when a few players are missing. But that without Renshaw there, that batting lineup looks weak. I expect them to be towards the bottom rather than at the top. But Div 1, you never really know, to be honest. And the key thing of Hampshire's win is that no one else won. All the other games were draws. So even first game, obviously very, very early days, but to get a win on the board is pretty significant when we know it's likely to be very tight coming into the season. Yeah,
as you say, just one of two sides across the two divisions to win in the first round of games. Notts in Division 2 with the others. It was a very high-scoring round of game. Tim, a very high-scoring round of games.
Got a wicket.
There we go. What's it now? 39 for 1. Is that Burns gone? Tim Wigmore wrote a piece in the Telegraph about how April is the most understood month in the county calendar since 2015. It's the highest scoring month of the lot. Possible reasons include more time for ground staff to prepare pitches, as Rory Burns said on last week's show, and that batters are more in their groove at the start of a season than bowlers are. I also think that there's just a lack of heat to add pace to hardness and pace to wickets must factor.
And Butch said it, didn't he, last year?
Saying it's always been the case that a rock hard, cold ball doesn't swing.
Yeah,
for whatever reason, but it doesn't seem to.
There was one ball though in that Hampshire Somerset game that sort of people were saying it sort of sums up where they're at as Test side, which Keith Barker bowled to Steve Davis, I think, which sort of it pitched basically. It was bowled straight, like it wasn't angled in, and pitched on like a 7th, 8th stump line. Davis understandably leaves it, and then it just pitches and just moves in absolutely massively and takes it off stump. And I mean, not all the pitches were doing that, but there is still the possibility for balls to that in England, which doesn't feel like it happens in that many other places in the world.
I think if the runs continued to flow, it'd be quite interesting to see which bowlers do well this month, and you might not need to have that good a set of numbers to actually stand out. Although, as I say that, the leading wicket takers in the country so far are Ben Sanderson, Ryan Higgins and Mohammad Abbas. But it'd be quite interesting if someone like who's slightly quicker, like the two guys at Durham, Potts and Cars, if they're even averaging like 26 and the runs are flowing, that could be quite interesting. Ben, what's your moment of the week?
So mine's also from the County Championship, from Division 2. It was obviously the sporting drama that everyone was following on Sunday evening, which was Leicestershire against Worcestershire. Leicestershire had to bat out all day to save the game, and it looked like it wasn't going to happen when they lost their 9th wicket with just under a session left. And Bjorn Hendricks joined Hassan Azad. Leicestershire were not very happy about that 9th wicket to fall. They originally tweeted saying like that Chris Wright has been given out to LBW rather than is out to LBW, and then posted the video just with a sort of an ellipsis with the with the decision there. So they weren't happy with that, and then somehow those two just batted out for 20 or more than 25 overs for the draw. Ended up as the two top scorers in the innings. Hassan Azad batted through for 104, not out, batting just a little bit over 6 hours. So an incredible effort, and it was very dramatic watching those final few moments. Just shows how the County Championship can throw up thrillers, even when the pitches are that like there's even in this round. I think you looked at it sort of on maybe halfway through day 3, and there was that one game that was pretty much done, and you looked at the others being like, are any of these going to be interesting? And actually, you always do get 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 games. As it with this round, there was also Northants played an amazing game with Gloucestershire, which was Northants looked like they were dead set to win it with about 45 minutes to go. They were 5 down and needed just over run a ball, and then lost 3 quick wickets and were hanging on at the end. And also the Sussex, the Sussex Notts game was amazing, where Sussex made 375 to begin with and had Notts 60 for 4, and then Notts' number 9, Joey Everson, made 100 and gave them a big lead, and then they ended up winning that game pretty comfortably, although with not too much time to spare. But there just always seemed to be like a few very, very exciting games per round.
Even Derbyshire looked at one stage like when Shamasub was going, that they might pull off a win at Middlesex.
Just going back to Ben's moment, and just a word for Ed Pollock, who has gone back to Worcester. He began at Worcester through the pathway, then went to Warwickshire. Made a name for himself in 2020 cricket with this extraordinary strike rate. It's, I think, the 8th best strike rate in the history of T20 cricket. Only Finn Allen and Andre Russell are of current players higher than him. So he made a big splash there, but he didn't really get a chance in red ball cricket. He's gone back to Worcester, and he made a run a ball 100 in their second innings to set that declaration up in that Leicester game. And it's just a nice story, really. You know,
it's championship debut, right?
Championship debut. Yeah. He'd played 5 first-class games before that, but never in the championship. First go, they had a bit of a lead. They wanted looking to set up a declaration, and he went out there and he played, as he would say, his natural way, and a rambunctious run-a-ball 100. So, you know, even it was quite an underwhelming week in some respects, but you still get these interesting subtext stories. You know, Matt Critchley as well at Essex, 104 for on a flat one, admittedly, but his debut for Essex as well, and he's obviously very much in the conversation regarding possible, higher honours and so on and so on. So it was an interesting week in some respects, but there was also some quite tough watches. There were some dry games in there. But then, would you rather, games are done in 2.5 days and it's a lottery, or over 16 games per team, a few of these games are probably quite useful, I would say.
We also
cutting
know
the wheat from the chaff,
and also, we can't complain about
it both ways.
Yeah,
but we also know how quickly it shifts. Like, this is not dissimilar to the start of last season when there were a lot of runs in those early weeks, and we were talking about someone might actually get to 1,000 runs before the end of May, and actually then the bowlers have their day, and it's like Butcher was saying, you just got to pick the times when to cash in, and he was talking about midsummer. Oddly, maybe early April is the other time to cash in, and then because that's the new midsummer when you don't really get one in the championship.
It was a good week for a few players in and around the England setup. Alex Lees scored 182, not out for Durham. Ollie Pope scored a half century for Surrey. Ben Fote scored an unbeaten 100 against Warwickshire as well for Surrey. And James Bracey scored 117 in that game for Gloucestershire.
That was a really good innings, that one, because that was when Gloucestershire were in trouble in that first innings.
Couple of other talking points from the first week's round of action. I think the relative lack of spin is interesting when the scores are this high. There were some punchy quotes from pod favourite Matt Parkinson this week. He said, it's a problem with the pitches, especially in Division 2, when teams need results, they panic and they don't go down the spin route, they go down the green seamer route. You have 23-year-old seamers who have played 60 or 70 first-class games.
And he's barely played 30.
I'm almost 26 and have played 35. You've got just a generic county seamer who's played 70 games because he's part of a 4-man team attack. Spinners are never going to improve if you're not playing. Standout spinner in the first week was Liam Patson-White, who took 8 in that victory.
Got
for
very
Notts.
good record he has.
He does. He's done really, really well. I think definitely a player to watch this summer.
And also at Trent Bridge as well, it doesn't really turn that, or he's not got a reputation for turning that much up there. So
and he bats crucially, which we know with England's spinner.
Yeah, he averages just a tick under 30 with the bat as well. So he's an interesting, he's a resourceful sort of cricketer. You know, he's not a sort of cricketer that you go to watch, but you know, these are the kinds of cricketers that you're looking for. You know, cricketers who get the most out of what they have. Parkinson's quotes were interesting and quite timely and quite punchy as well. And fair play to him. We've all done press days here. They can often be quite dry lunches, to say the least. But this was his moment, and he just clearly thought, "Sod it, I'm just gonna talk from the gut, really." Having worn a fluorescent bib for another 2 months around the West Indies, and you know, speaking to a couple of players who were with him at the time, he was absolutely distraught that he didn't make a debut there, and he thought that was finally going to be his moment. And he's come back and he said, "We have an attitude problem." You know, that was his quote, and you can't. It's hard to argue against that, really. We're also at the Oval here. Surrey are now coached by Gareth Batty, who speaks very eloquently and importantly about our attitude to spin, and yet it's quite telling, albeit this is early season, that they've picked 2 sides now, one at Edgbaston, one here at Surrey, at the Oval, and there's not a spinner to be seen, apart from Will Jacks, who will bowl a little bit. In fact, he bowled 30-odd overs at Warwickshire, but he's clearly not a frontline spinner. And
they've got 2 good young spinners.
And they've got 2 good young English spinners here as well, plus another spinner in Steele who they've brought in. So, yeah, look, this conversation will run and run and run.
And I'd say
to the end of time.
Just Parkinson's quotes, I don't think they were really too self-serving either. Obviously, there is he is speaking for his own benefit in some ways, but he does feel that he gets a good go at Lancashire. I mean, he missed the first game last season, was not happy about it, but played 12 games last season, is playing today, and he was saying that it is like, he almost is like the in charge of that sort of young spinners group around the country. I think it name checks a lot of them.
He's talking about what he's experienced previously and now seeing it play out across the country, and he's in a good position to speak openly. And I think that's part of the reason we don't just like him because he's a good leg spinner. It's also because he says what he thinks.
Yeah.
The one I'd love to see Matt Parkinson play a Test match. I'd love to see him play next month, but. The one I think that they will be looking very hard at is Critchley, because he's a top 6 batter. And in the way that Moeen was initially conceived by England as a batter who might fill in, and then obviously became arguably more of a bowler who batted, but Critchley could do that job, and then you could open it up. You could play one spinner. You could play him, in theory, in the top 6, or you could live a little and play a keeper at 6 and him at 7. And then he could be that second spin option. And I'm not saying he's going to go and take lots of Test wickets. His first-class record is good, but it's not outstanding. He has 118 wickets. You can tell that I had to write these county files for the magazine.
Honestly,
118 wickets from 60-odd
He's on fire,
118 wickets from 60-odd first-class games. So, and he averages, you know, near enough around 40-odd per wicket, albeit this is bowling leg spin in England. So he's not going to come in there and take fifers, but he might come in there on a turning track and have an influence, but you can kind of look at him and think there's runs in that player, you know. So he's the one of all the conversations around all the spin options. I think he's the one that they'll be really, really interested in.
I can see the Twitter replies already 1 week into his Essex career, and Phil saying he's an England player in waiting.
Yeah,
I guess
the
thing
really, really well last week.
Yeah, I guess the thing with Critchley is he had a really good season with the bat last season, but that was his first very good season with the bat, and then 2. I don't really know where his bowling's at. His economy rated first-class cricket's 4, which is quite high. Like when we're talking about Parkinson's in the low 2s really. So I guess, and also like when the season really gets up and running, there's no Simon Harman in that game. How much does Critchley actually bowl when you got Harman at one end and Cook and Porter just rotating the other?
Indeed. And as I say, you know, his record is ambiguous with the ball. It's hard to make a proper call on it, but you know, that Pakistan 3-test series in Pakistan looms quite large for an England team that is pedestrian, especially in the spin department. So
he's got to get in as a batter first and foremost.
Indeed,
basically, he has another 1,000-run season, and then he can bowl leg spin as well. Then he suddenly looks a really attractive proposition.
But if we're looking at spinners who can bat rather than batters who can spin it, I guess two names. One that was very briefly mentioned is Liam Dawson. Like when he played Test cricket, didn't disgrace himself, contributed in both disciplines, was kind of almost, was other people were picked over him rather than being dropped and then slipped down the pecking order when England had sort of more spin options. Like Moeen Ali was just established himself at that point. You can see how they might end up going back to a guy who bowls pretty serviceable left on spin and is a very, very good number 8. The other guy is Danny Briggs, who was on that Lions tour, 300 first-class wickets at a pretty good record, got a first-class 100, an average of nearly 20. Again, he's one that doesn't disgrace that tail and is one that I think they will also look at to see how it goes, I think. Briggs
was selected for the Lions tour and then rejected the call-up.
That's right, yeah.
But yeah, it's quite interesting. Like last summer, England didn't pick their number 1 spinner in favour of a spinner who could bat in the top 7. So that's clearly what they're after in home conditions, or at least they were last summer with Root and Silverwood in charge.
Yeah, and also a lot of this depends on how you review or assess Leach's tour of the Caribbean, which is quite a tricky one. I think you could argue it either way, really, because he comes away, his numbers are pretty good. Certainly didn't go for many runs, but then no one was really coming after him, and he didn't win England the match, crucially. You could equally argue that, you know, he had a good series, he's England's number 1 spinner, why do we shift him?
Let's argue it then. Where is the dial for you on Leach's series?
I find it really difficult myself, really. There is definitely the temptation to look at someone different because you feel like we've come to a stage with Leach where you know exactly what you're going to get, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but there's also that thought that, you know, maybe we could get something more here. But I still come back to the point, I don't think he's done anything to deserve being dropped, and that's quite a tricky place to find yourself. So I think, again, it's a bit of a cop-out. I think so much comes down to these early weeks. There's no point in throwing in a spinner who's barely bowled in April or May for a first test, I don't think. So someone's got to come in with some form, with some wickets behind them, and then potentially it could leapfrog Leach.
Okay.
What about you? You want to see someone new?
I would say overall his tour net good by a percentage point or 2.
Like your perception of him didn't change, right?
That's it. That's exactly it. He's an honest toiler who got through 68 overs, I think, at Barbados.
In one innings.
For 120 odd runs. You know,
you have to watch that.
Yeah, you have to admire
Barbados.
You have to admire his cussedness and respect the shift he put in. But I just don't see enough going on there for him to affect cricket matches unless he's playing on an absolute Bunsen, and then it becomes something of a lottery anyway. I mean, Joe Root took 5 for 9 or 5 for 8 or whatever it was this time last year. So I just don't see enough going on those kinds of tracks where you do have to wheedle out wickets. His accuracy is, it seems to me, not just his central trait, but pretty much his only trait. It was interesting to see the combination of him and Lawrence on that final day. I think maybe at Antigua, actually, although it might have been Barbados. They just merged into those two test matches. But there was more going on in the air with Lawrence. There was more dip and fizz, and Leach would just turn and keep going and going and going. Now, there's virtue in that. But if you're looking to really take this side on, and I say that from a very, very low base at the moment, then I would like to see some other options in there.
Yeah, so I agree with all that, but I also agree with Joe that unless someone else has a really, really good start to the season, I would probably stick with Leach for the moment. I think Leach did okay, and we just don't know about the others. And I really wanted to make this point when we were doing pods around the West Indies series, and I really wanted Parkinson to play. I don't know how Parkinson is going to be the Test cricketer. I'm not saying Parkinson is the saviour. He's going to completely change how England do in any way, but I thought that was just such a good opportunity to see, and I'm not sure first home test of the summer against a good New Zealand side is the time to try out someone like Parkinson if he's your next man in.
As we're talking briefly on the West Indies, my moment of the week is not Brevis. You can have that one. My moment of the week, I spoke to Craig Brathwaite last week.
Oh, nice.
Over the phone, yeah. I'd spoken to Ian Bishop about him around the same time, and Bishop said to me, Craig will tell you himself he's a man of few words. I think it's even less than that. So I wasn't expecting a particularly fulsome conversation. That said, we had a nice time. It's bad to build up an interview that's in the upcoming magazine by saying I spoke to somebody who's quite taciturn and doesn't give much away. That's not a great sell, admittedly. But there's a kind of quiet confidence there, quiet authority there, and just taken in isolation, what he did individually at Barbados was extraordinary. Now, I know you two sat there in your Bermudas watching it all happen, but those numbers are still staggering, what he managed to pull off. And that was a serious win for the West Indies. Yeah, it's a real sort of landmark win, I would say. They are building something slowly and under the radar there, but they've got some interesting cricketers. Now, they obviously lack a little bit of class in the batting, and this is what I was coming to, that I asked him about the peculiar fact that we'd both watched the previous day Hetmeyer smash 45 in about 5 minutes in the IPL with a big beaming smile on his face, and we both watched it. And the day before, Evan Lewis had gone up against Nicholas Pooran, and these are all interesting cricketers, good cricketers who can bat in a proper way. And I asked him about it, and he said, if we can find a way, then I know that they'd want to come back. Paraphrasing, but essentially he said that. And then it was backed up by something that Bishop said to me a day or two later, that he says he knows for a fact that if those conversations can be resurrected, then Hetmeyer in particular would be very interested in having it. Hetmeyer has played Test cricket, but played the last of his tests 3 years ago when he was 22.
Yeah.
When he was 22. Pooran, again, says, I haven't played Test cricket yet. With emphasis on that word. And so maybe it's not quite as cut and dried. Maybe that door isn't quite as wedged shut as we feared it might be. And if you can drop in a fantasy player or two into that middle order, and they can play enough red ball cricket to get used to the change, then it becomes a really interesting team to watch.
Yeah, especially that attack. And Pooran played a first-class game for the first time in ages, reasonably recently. I think he went something like 7 years without playing first-class cricket at all. And they got him in. I think he played for the West Indies A team. I guess maybe a New Zealand A team quite recently.
One last thing on Brathwaite before I go and get a glass of water. One last thing on Brathwaite. He really got going when I asked him about his nags, his horses. So he is a breeder of horses at the high level in Barbados. Did you know this?
No.
Did you know this?
No.
No, I didn't either. But he comes alive when he talks about horses.
I did not expect to be talking about Craig Brathwaite's horses in the first 25 minutes.
You're already looking at the clock, aren't you? Anyway, his horse, War Eagle, won the Boxing Day Barbados Derby in 2020, which is the biggest race in Barbados every year. It's the Gold Cup equivalent. And his horse, War Eagle, won it 2 years ago. He has various mares on his grounds, if you like, in Barbados. His cousin runs the stables, but he's very closely involved in it, and he said he couldn't imagine life without it.
Another interesting aspect of the first round of the county championship was that a lot of England bowlers, or England contracted bowlers, shall we say, didn't play. Stuart Broad kind of explained this, saying that you can't really play 7 rounds of back-to-back games before the first test of the summer, which is quite interesting. Interesting that Broad still considered himself in the running for that.
I thought an odd one who didn't play was Zach Crawley, who didn't play for Kent, but the ECB had said he was available to be selected, but Kent and Crawley between them decided that he wanted further rest, which, I'm not saying it was the wrong decision. I don't know anything about what's going on there, but it seemed an interesting one for a batter who I would have thought, having scored a few runs in the Caribbean, would have been raring to go at the start of the season.
Maybe he wanted a slightly longer break. Wasn't that long. He's back in the side for the second round of games in for Denley, who I think is injured. We've got an email in from one of our listeners, Joe. Hello all. Might be a bit keen, but looking for some county championship related advice for next weekend, if you can oblige. The streaming revolution got me hooked on the championship last year, and despite Derbyshire being a bit rubbish, I loved it. High hopes for Masood and Lakmal. Critchley broke my heart. As I'm trapped in London by virtue of work, I'm trying to get down to the Oval or Lords to see a smattering of games during the summer. Thanks to the preview of the season in the latest Wisden Cricket Monthly, I've circled Surrey versus Hampshire over Easter weekend as a must-watch. However, I've only ever been to international 100 and T20 blast games. My question is this. What do I need to be aware of / plan for when going to watch a county championship game? Will there be food to buy? Will there be overpriced flat beer for me to waste my money on? Should I pack a picnic? The anorak, fleece and brolly and all are in the bag already. But how else does a solo viewer go about maximising their day? I envisage a day nodding off in the spring sun and forgetting about work with a flask of coffee, sausage rolls and some soothing radio commentary. How far off am I? Cheers,
that
Joe.
sounds lovely. Quite fancy.
What do you reckon?
Bring a picnic. Yeah, the price is here. Yeah, definitely bring a picnic. Get yourself a copy of the Who's Who.
I was going to say, shall I plug that so it doesn't seem totally...
Which is sold out, by the way. That Cricket's Who's Who.
Genuinely being reprinted.
Reprinted, sold out. Who says that county cricket's on its arse?
But it's wonderful. I think we should explain what it is because I think that some of listeners might... Like, I didn't know what it was until I started here.
Let's do a bit on the cricket.
To be fair, you didn't know what cricket was until you started.
That's true.
Joey Harman.
But basically, they send questionnaires are sent out to all county cricketers with stuff. Who's your favourite player? What's your favourite shot? That sort of thing. But also getting a bit more in depth. What would you like to do outside of it? What would you change about the game? That sort of thing. And there is like something that is interesting and sort of changes your perception a little bit, I would say, every few pages. And it's also just very fun to leaf through and also invaluable for when you look up sort of why is this guy batting at number 6? What's going on with this thing? It's got all the stats, obviously, prior to this season. So I'd say it's a very worthwhile thing to have that gives you an insight into county cricketers that you don't really get elsewhere, I would say.
That's not even an ad there. That's
brilliant.
But it is available on wisden.com/shop.
Yas drew attention to Tom Banton's entry. Did he mention this to you, Joe, as well?
Just hates cricket. I thought exactly the same thing.
Well,
as
Ben showed it to me first, but yeah.
Yeah. Ways to change the game, less of it. Improvements, just don't play it.
And what do you most like? Time away from cricket.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reason why we noticed that was that in the Ahmedabad Test match last year, the totally crazy day, Banton tweeted something about Xbox Live or something like that. It was very clear that he wasn't watching this amazing period of
I've got a lot
play.
of respect for that. But so Benj Moorhead, who edits the Who's Who, has done so for a few years. Bless him, he's trying to come up with new questions each year, which is quite tricky when you've done it for a while. So I think he might be running a bit dry. One of them this year was, what's your favourite smell?
Wow.
Strong.
Laurie Evans' favourite smell is petrol. Is one that
a lot of people say that.
petrol
A
heads
lot
in
of people say that.
Slightly
A lot
worrying.
of people say that.
Especially with the current crisis of fuel costs. They'll be
absolutely
missing their
right.
favourite smells.
God, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Excellent. Paul asks, what does a managing director of English cricket actually do? And with Rob Key being the front runner, should we expect a lot of Kent players getting Test call-ups? Rob Key is reportedly the front runner for the job after Marcus North pulled out of the running due to family reasons. That is a good question. We did a piece on Wisden.com yesterday, kind of just going through all the things that Rob Key has said in his capacity as a Sky pundit in the last few months. This is all from before the West Indies series, and this is just speculation, but I'm going to hazard a guess that I don't think he himself thought he'd be in the running for this job when he was saying a lot of this stuff. He made it pretty clear that he'd split the coaching job. He thinks that the job should be split.
Good.
He said on the England's next head coach, he said who the ideal person is probably someone who wouldn't want the job for love nor money, like Ricky Ponting. He mentioned Fleming, Jai Warner as well. On English coaches, he said Alex Stewart would be perfect, but Stewart would probably only want it to do it on an interim basis. He thought Kirsten would be suitable, but he said that looking at his success with India, you have to work out whether it was Kirsten or Dhoni who really was leading that team. On who should captain England in Test cricket, he was reasonably critical of Root. He said a lot of people have lost their jobs, but Root has probably made more bad decisions than anyone else.
Did you add in there that he was broadly supportive of Anderson and Broad not going?
Yeah, in quite a nuanced way. He basically said that if they haven't gone because of atmosphere in the dressing room,
Then that's garbage.
that's awful.
Yeah.
But England should be looking at how they become the best side in the world in 2-3 years' time, and England are miles away from that. So it's not going to be with Anderson on board. So he was reasonably supportive of that. On the captaincy, reasonably critical of Root, but also acknowledged there's not anyone who's obvious to come in. He's also said, though, the best captain in that entire setup, or the person who's the most likely candidate or would be the best captain, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is Josh Buttler. But the problem with that is that he doesn't get in the team at the moment.
Interesting.
Which is quite interesting. He was very critical.
I should have put him in that list.
He was very critical of the negative mentality that has taken over English batting in particular, with techniques being governed by how do I avoid doing this rather than how do I score runs.
He's been very vocal about poor pitches as well. That's a real kind of bugbear of his.
So it's quite interesting when someone gets appointed to these kind of jobs. You don't actually know what they think that much. Was key. There's a lot
paid
out
to
there.
tell us what he thinks for the last few years. Yeah.
Nothing since the West Indies series though, so I don't know if he's changed his mind or any of that. And he didn't explicitly say that he'd move on from Root. He just criticised Root and pointed out the flaws in other people being captain.
And when you say front runner here, obviously Marcus North was being talked up, has drifted away from the conversation, apparently doesn't want it. Who else is still in the conversation? Who else is meant to be in the running at this point?
In what I've read, it's not clear that there's many or anyone.
Has Ed Smith been ruled out? He was
I'm
in
not
there
sure.
at some point.
I'm not sure, to be honest. But Telegraph are also reporting
former
that
Kent top order batsman.
Yeah.
Is Dave Thornton in the mix as well?
Phil, what does the managing director do? I guess just takes care of the big cricketing decisions, which I guess at the moment are who's the next head coach is a pretty big thing, and then I guess questions around structure of what a normal season looks like, that kind of stuff.
Well, when Giles was doing it, he was very hands-on in the obvious areas, such as, chief selector and so on. But he was managing it through COVID, and so he was very, very intimately involved in the management of the players themselves. And there were a number of big decisions that became notorious decisions regarding players who are coming back and forth in and out of bubbles, missing certain games. Buttler missed 3 of those 4 test matches in India, for example. He was walking a very, very fine line all the time, Giles, and I do have a degree of sympathy for him. That was a very, very difficult time to be in that job. I understand why they moved on from him in the end after what happened in the Ashes and his kind of rather defensive media statements and so on. I can understand why they moved on, but it was a very difficult time. And it's not going to get much easier either, because that fundamental tension between white balls and red, and if Key has said, as I personally agree with, that he would split the jobs, split the captaincy, split the coaching roles as well.
And get
the
selected
captaincy's
back
already split,
well.
but the other coaching roles to be siloed as well. Finding both of those camps to be content with their lot is a very, very, very tricky decision and a very tough gig for whoever takes it on. Key I'm warming to Key as an idea. Initially, I was a bit cold on it, to be honest, and I thought it didn't quite fit. That it felt a little bit jobs for the boys, a little bit too media-y. That there was a sense of he's had a good run at Sky, and and suddenly you have this kind of disproportionate impact on the game because you are in the public eye through the media, but he doesn't really have any administrative experience. He was a good, relatively laid-back captain for Kent. They didn't achieve anything under his tenure, but he was always very popular, clubbable kind of character within the game. Gets on well with people within the game, but he didn't strike me as a figurehead in the way that Strauss does. He's not run a county club. He's not run a county dressing room from a coaching perspective. Giles obviously had. Strauss had run the England side. But the more I think about it, and the big caveat is, or the corollary rather, is that there isn't anybody else, and it's a weird job, and no one really wants to do it, or hardly anybody's put their hand up to do it. Stuart was in the conversation; he doesn't want it either. So the more I think about it, the more he will be. If it is him, he will be popular, open, I think that kind of sense that with the ECB that there's a sort of defensive force field around them and that they become more bunker mentality, as you saw, especially in Australia. I don't see that really with Key, hopefully. I think he will look people in the eye and explain his decisions, as did Ed Smith when he was in charge of the selection panel. So I'm warming to it.
It's heartening, kind of as you intimate, it's heartening that he wants it. I mean, obviously, it will pay pretty well. But, you know, so will being a pundit for Sky, and this will bring so much more stress than that job will. It obviously shows that he does deeply care about the thing, which is a great start. And as you say, the jobs for the boys thing, that's been a kind of slight issue of mine as well. But there is also the fact that the popularity is quite important here. And you look at the mess around Paul Downton, for instance, if you go back to that, just no one really liked him in that role. No one really seemed to respect him. And Strauss, you know, Key and Strauss, as you said, are very, very different. But Key is broadly respected. I think his views are respected as a commentator. He talks in kind of measured enough terms, but whilst also actually having opinions. And I think that bodes quite well. The problem is he hasn't done anything that relates to this job. But then this job is so weird that
there's so few people
it's
have
quite
those.
hard. I mean, that's why Marcus North felt quite oddly quite a compelling candidate because he'd actually done the thing.
Mark Ramprakash, new columnist for WCM, did we mention that at all?
A couple of times.
Yeah. He rather waspishly said, without naming names, he said, I wouldn't necessarily want to see the next director of England men's cricket be somebody who ascends to the job on the back of being quite popular in commentary boxes. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially said that.
Could also have applied to Mark Nicholas, though, couldn't it? He was in rooming with... Because I thought Key,
Also
but actually
true.
Mark Nicholas
God,
might.
that would have been a dumpster fire. You imagine that?
That'd been entertaining.
Yeah, it would. It would. Yeah, roll up for that one. Anyway, who can say? It does sound like it's going to be him, though.
Yeah. There were a few relatively interesting outcomes from the ICC board meeting this week. They confirmed that the USA will qualify automatically for the 2024 Men's T20 World Cup as they are co-host with the West Indies.
Big news, that?
It is, yeah. And Ben made
Really
the point
big
before
news.
we started recording. It'll be interesting to see if that applies to other countries like your Scotlands, your Irelands, your Netherlands, if they are co-host for anything down the line. And the other bit of news is that South Africa will host the first ever Under-19 Women's T20 World Cup, which will take place in January next year. The big piece of news from English cricket this morning was that England's 2017 World Cup final hero, Anya Shrubsole, has announced her retirement from the international game at the age of 30. Shrubsole is the leading English wicket taker in all T20I cricket, men's or women's, and her 6 of 46 in the 2017 final of the best ever figures taken in a World Cup final, men's or women's. She was the first ever woman to appear on the front cover of the Wisden Almanac back in 2018. In her statement, she said, "I feel immensely privileged to have been able to represent my country for the past 14 years. To have been involved in women's cricket at a time of such growth has been an honour, but it has become clear to me that it is moving forward faster than I can keep up with. So it is time for me to step away." Isha Guha, a former teammate of Shrubsole, tweeted, "An incredible career, tremendous skill, belief, combined with an amazing passion for the game. You've inspired so many, Anya. You will be missed, but look forward to what comes next." Phil, an amazing career with a crowning moment up there with the very, very greatest in English cricketing history.
Yeah, well summed up. Absolutely that. Anyone who was there lost their minds in the most perfect way. You know, that was sporting theatre at its best. She will always be a legend as a consequence of that day, even if she hadn't done anything else in her career, and she did a hell of a lot. I think there was a question regarding certain spells that she's bowled. Well, truth be told, she wasn't really, apart from that one day, she wasn't really the kind of bowler that blew teams away. What she was a very skilled opening bowler. With that kind of induct, that natural induct, she was lethal against left-handers. And the spell that sticks in my mind was the spell early doors in the Test match when England had gone in there and a few people felt they might be a little bit kind of shot shy, and that the attack might lack a little bit of teeth. And she went in there and just had it on a string and nicked a couple off, took two in that opening spell, and it was like a rolling back the years kind of spell, really. It's interesting in that statement, and she's right. You know that the game physically is moving on, but she can she can settle back and know that she did great work, really. And I met her a couple of times, quite a sort of reserved character, but I went to her house in Loughborough and did an interview. Got the dog was the star of the show, her dog, her beloved dog. But yeah, she's a really interesting reader of the game. I don't know if the media will be her area, but I wouldn't be surprised if she moves into coaching, because she's an astute reader of the game. Once you can get her talking, if you like, and yeah, as you say, she'll always be the queen of one of the great moments in English sporting history. It's certainly cricketing sporting history.
You're correct when you say she didn't really blow teams away too often, but she obviously was so reliable at getting that in swing every time, which I don't think should be underrated. It is an incredible skill to do it every single time you have a new ball in your hand. But she did have a certain sort of like clutch presence, I think, in that semi-final in 2017. It was her that, in a pretty tense finish against Africa, where England ended up winning by 2 wickets with a couple of balls remaining, she
did it again the other week.
Exactly, yeah. And she even got better as that World Cup went on as well, sort of realising that the moment was sort of gathering. And then even in that final, she bowled pretty well. But there was one game, because you picked out a test match, and there was an early test match, the last time that England women won the Ashes in Australia, and they won it by virtue of winning the test. They lost both the ODI and T20I series that time. And she took 7 wickets in the game, including the opening 2 wickets of the Australia first innings, which sort of gave England the early advantage, and then got them back into it like Australia were going to get a decent lead after England had made 200 odd, and then got Perry out in the second innings with her having top scored in both innings. And that's obviously, last time England won it, which is a long time ago now. And just that, in a way, I think that could have almost been her best format, because she is a player that could bowl those balls that you just couldn't, that could get any batter out at any time, but she just didn't get to play as much as she otherwise might have. Yeah.
The IPL, Ben, we've had a few more games, a couple of moments to pick out. There was one incredible finish with Rahul Tewatia, the star of the show again, and you've got a good stat on this as well.
Yeah, so he hit, with 12 needed off 2 balls, he hit 2 sixes to win it, and he and Dhoni are the only 2 cricketers to do that in the IPL, which sort of fits with Tewatia, is this guy who
came from nowhere.
Yeah, doesn't really have a huge record to speak of, but just if there is he's like the the Shrubsole of the IPL, I guess, in terms of that clutch moment. Whenever there's sort of,
I'm not sure that's going to stick.
Whenever there's sort of a moment that you think only an all-time great cricketer could pull something off here, or Tewatia could, basically, is how it kind of seems to be. Yeah.
My moment of the week was from the IPL. It was yesterday. 18-year-old Brevis for the Mumbai Indians, impressed in the Under-19 World Cup, hit 4 sixes in a row of Rahul Chahar yesterday. The last one was 112 metres long. Obviously, quite a lot of hype around him, and Mumbai Indians are doing very badly this year, but that was pretty incredible.
And such good innings that even Tom Banton decided to tune in and watch it, right?
I hope this doesn't become like a long-running joke on the show. But he was 1 run away from becoming the youngest overseas player to score an IPL half-century.
Yeah, I saw that as well. 4 in a row, as you say, they were big shots. There was 2 over 100 metres. It's already a boring cliche to say that he's a De Villiers clone, but it's uncanny, even the way he moves, the way he holds his bat, the way he runs between the wickets, the swagger, everything is completely modelled on him. And as you say, Mumbai Indians are stinking the place out. It's quite interesting to see. Interesting. Oh, that word again. Mumbai Indians are stinking the place out. And yeah, how they go. It's a repeat of many years before, isn't it? Where they always start very slowly and people write them off, and then they sort of find a way to put it round. But looking at that side yesterday, it felt like it's lacking a little bit of sparkle, to be honest.
They're not using their 4 overseas slots that often, which is
Tamal Mills is on the bench, I noticed.
He came back off it yesterday and wasn't great. It was quite expensive again. They've got their 2 brightest sparks are probably these 2 kids. Tilak Verma being the other one yesterday, kind of kept them in that game.
18 and 19, I think they are, yeah.
There was a piece written for Wisden.com by one of CricViz's new analysts, Kieran Palmley, about looking at...
Better known on Twitter as
Burberspin. Looking at Mumbai Indians' poor start to the season and what are the factors behind it, but also wondering if they basically, because they have such, a a presence in the IPL and they're so well established, the people in the team are so sort of secure in their roles that they can almost afford to plan for the future more than other franchises can. So at the last auction, which might well be the last mega auction which they had because there were these 2 new teams coming in, so they needed to revamp everything, they might well now want to have these teams get more and more established identities and sets of players, rather than, I love watching Ravichandran Butler and then he goes to another team in a few seasons when you rejig all the teams again. So they do have a really good core of young players. They're just not quite there yet, I guess. The other thing is that Rohit Sharma has been in quite poor IPL form for like 6 years now. Since the last time he averaged 13, he's only scored at a strike rate of over 130 in like one of those seasons. So that's quite interesting, is that their senior players are perhaps slightly aging out of their prime, just about, but they do have that young core that they've put in place for this season. The other thing is Archie, they spent loads of money on, knowing wouldn't be able to play the season, and then next year might come back and they might have a proper team again.
A coaching group of Tendulkar, Jayawardene, Shane Bond and Zaire Khan. I mean,
there's an amazing
what
moment
a gig that is.
During the strategic
What a
timeout,
gig.
Tendulkar and Jayawardene came onto the field to have a chat with Brevis. It's like, that must be so strange. But then we worked out in the office that Brevis was 9 when Sachin last played a test match, so he might not know who he is.
Get out of my face, son. You've been enjoying the IPL, Joe?
Not watched the ball of it, Phil.
There we go.
Too much cricket, as Rory Burns said on our last show. I think that was specifically county cricket, wasn't it? But yeah, too much cricket in general. Can't keep up with it all.
Banton's got a
Focusing
point,
on Hampshire's title run.
And we've been producing a frankly brilliant magazine as well, haven't we?
There is that.
Which we only finished up last
We'll talk
night.
about that on next week's show in
All right,
greater
I'm just
detail.
saying.
I know you're a
Don't mention the magazine, Phil. It's not the allotted
One of the
slot.
best we've done.
The most newsworthy moment from the last week, though, was Ravichandran Ashwin's tactical retirement for the Rajasthan Royals. Promoted up to 6 to offer a bit of stability after a top order collapse. Ashwin hit 28 off 23 before retiring himself out, with 10 balls of the innings left to let Rian Parag, arguably a superior hitter, have a whack. He hit 8 off 4 and Rajasthan won by 3 runs. It's an entirely legal tactical innovation. It's the first time it's ever happened in the IPL. It is divided opinion. Here's what Butch thinks. Butch, good to speak to you. Every few years it seems like Ravichandran Ashwin kind of throws a moral cricket question to the rest of us. This time it's over tactical retirements. It is entirely within the laws of the game, but you're not a massive fan of it.
Yeah. I don't think he is the story here. I think he's perfectly entitled to do it. The laws of the game in the tournament state that you can. So I've got no issue with it on a sort of a law making or moral level. I just find it a slightly bizarre addition to what is already if the truth be known, or if people are understood, they're quite a complicated sport. You've got a batting lineup. 2 teams have got batting lineups in which you can send anybody in any order you like. Right, so it's well within your tactical remit to send in the right person at the right time, and to be able to sort of retire out a batter who's either stuffing it up so badly or who's been sent in to do something else without losing a delivery. Of course, the batter can't come back in again, but in T20 cricket, that's often not a problem. How many times do teams get bowled out? Very few. I find it just an unnecessary addition, really, particularly as there's no equivalent for the fielding side. I suppose the one thing that might balance that out would be, you've picked your 5 bowlers or your 5 bowlers and a safety valve in the 11, but then you're allowed to sort of sub out one, bring in a relief pitcher for somebody who's having a bad day, and that would perhaps balance it up on both sides. But again, I don't really see the point. I don't see the need. And it's created some brilliant headlines and a lot of discussion, I suppose, about the fact that it's been used at all. I just don't see that it's necessary. But people will be free to disagree with me.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Ashwin on his YouTube channel defended it and explained it. He basically said that when the leg spinner came off, he hit a few 6 off the leg spinner. And when the leg spinner came off, he tried to score quickly, but wasn't quite nailing it, basically. And he likened it to substitutions in football and just thinks that T20 cricket is behind where it should be in terms of different tactical dimensions, whatever. And this is no different to a substitution in a football match.
Yeah, again, but I go back to the fact that you can send anybody in any order you like already. And if you've stuffed up and you've got yourself in at the wrong time, then you just have to get yourself out and get somebody else in. I don't think that the fielding side should be penalised for bowling well at a batter who's in. Not unless a bowling side is able to do exactly the same thing, whereby Joe Bloggs is having a terrible day with the new ball, you haul him off after he's bowled bowled an over or 5 deliveries or something, and then you get to replace him with somebody who can bowl his other 3. That for me would then be a fair balance and something that stacks up to the football comparison. I mean, the other thing with that is it's not football. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but it's a completely different sport that already has 1,000,001 tactical dimensions to it. Does it need another one? I don't think it does. Well, at least not one that doesn't have, the yin and yang of being able to do something that's beneficial to both the batting team and the bowling team. At the moment, it's all skewed one way.
I was talking to one of the CricViz guys about it earlier in the week, and they made the point that whatever you think of it, it's actually going to happen very rarely, even if people think it's fine.
Yeah.
Because you need like a perfect combination. I mean, one element of this was that Rajasthan had a collapse that meant that Ashwin was promoted over someone who would normally bat at 6. So you need a situation where that happens, that person stays in for long enough, and then you're actually only giving a few balls at the end. And crucially, actually, you need the personality of someone like Ashwin who's going to think like that, and then have the confidence in their position in the team to then do something like that. So actually, even if you think it's absolutely fine, it's not going to happen that often.
No, it isn't, which is another reason why I think it's an unnecessary addition. Say for example, I don't know, I'm Owen Morgan and Josh Butler's in, but Josh is having a shocker. And Owen decides, right, we can't put up with this any longer. I'm going to drag Josh Butler off the park, right? Now, making that call, because with somebody like Josh Butler that he could flick a switch and suddenly it all goes fine and he starts banging it out the park. You then bring a bloke back into your dressing room who is unbelievably peed off at being embarrassed in front of the world on that sort of stage, which means that you're absolutely right. It's very unlikely to happen. It's just, look, I don't have any sort of moral case against it for what Ashwin did. He's perfectly within his rights to it. It's in the laws. But I think if you're going to have a law that allows you to write a mistake in many ways, your fault. You don't have the right person at the crease at the time because you decided to shore things up rather than keep going. That's your tactical call. You then shouldn't get a get out of jail free card to reverse that tactical call. If the bowling team has no get out of jail free card to dismiss a bowler that they shouldn't have picked on that particular day. That's it. That's all I have.
Would you be okay if they changed the law to mean that a dot ball is also given when a batter's retired? Because I guess at the business end of a T20 innings, that's one of the best things about a wicket, right? It's also a dot ball.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That would solve it for you?
That you'd have to have, there has to be some sort of penalty invoked in it. Like I said, because there is no redress in the opposite direction. And that's why, in the cricket, you've always had that option, haven't you? So both of them trying to run out boycott at Leeds or whatever it might be, or a batter deciding that it's just, he's having an absolute shocker, he's killing his team, so he decides to waltz past one and get out. You lose the ball. Tough. That's all part of the game, always has been part of the game. And look, again, if people think, it's an exciting new thing and it's used up column inches, it's used up 15 minutes of our time so far talking about it, and it all attracts eyes to the game, then fine. But add something to the law that allows the bowling team to do something similar, and then it's fair. At the moment, it's a bit silly as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I've enjoyed having this chat once. I don't think I want to talk about this regularly. Cheers for your time, Butch, and see you next week.
No worries.
Before we come to our County Championship 11, South Africa beat Bangladesh in the second test of that series to take it 2-0. Keshav Maharaj had another amazing game, scored 84 in the first innings and took another second innings 7-for in the fourth innings.
2 lots of 7 for 30.
Yeah.
In a week and a half.
Yeah.
I mean,
and especially with Harman coming into the side as well, with the pressure on him. Harman did all right as well, 6 for 70.
I think
across
did they
the
say
game.
He was the first bowler in Test history to take consecutive fourth innings 7-fers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a lovely stat. I'll back you on that one, Ben. That's a good
Only
one.
Dale Steyn has taken more wickets for South Africa in a 2-match series.
There was one moment in that game which actually probably should have been a moment of the week. Did you see this? The bizarre dropped catch.
Yeah.
So it's cut pretty hard towards sort of backward point where Mahedi Hassan
yeah.
Miraz is, and he sees it to begin with. It looks like, and then his head just sort of turns to the left as if someone shouted his name, and then the ball just clangs into his stomach. So he's not braced for anything, and it is coming quite fast towards him. He's obviously just lost it in the seats or something. And then he had to be stretchered off, which is obviously alarming. And then was also back bowling like 10 overs later back on the field. So it was all very odd. And I would actually it's such a strange video to see, just especially the slow motion where you see the head turn. And then you assume that you're not seeing where the ball is properly. And then you realise it's actually him that has just completely lost it.
So I haven't seen this. If it hits him in the stomach, presumably, if he could see it, it would have been a very easy catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Odd.
Moving on, Wisden have hand-selected and sourced 10 extremely rare pieces of signed memorabilia. All pieces are 100% authentic and come with a hologram certificate of authenticity. Each piece is exclusive to the Wisden shop and cannot be purchased anywhere else. Autographs featured include cricketing legends like Sir Don Bradman, Ben Stokes, Shane Warne, Steve Waugh, Virat Kohli and Sachin Tendulkar. Global shipping is available, so they can be ordered from anywhere in the world. Available at wisden.com/shop. Right, on to the final piece of this show, our Uncapped County Championship 11 of the 21st century. Criteria is reasonably straightforward in theory, but I'm sure we'll argue it. I don't want to spend too long on this.
Good.
So, Joe, let's go with your openers.
We're going to have an argument immediately.
I know. I wanted to get this out of the way.
So, can I pick Ed Joyce? So, obviously, Ed Joyce has got one test cap for Ireland, but that came right at the end of his career. So, he was basically overlooked by England
I think you
throughout
can
his
pick
career.
Ed Joyce.
What was the name of the team again?
The Uncapped.
Yeah, I don't think you can have Ed Joyce.
I disagree.
I mean,
disagree.
Can we pick Stuart Law? Can we pick?
No, because he'd played for Australia.
Yeah, but I mean, we can't
That's
pick a guy
the
who was
difference. He was
uncapped
not
right at the end. I don't think personally.
All right, I don't have the energy for this.
I think no, just
All right.
because I think people will just scream at us.
Okay,
I
well,
hear the
they're
scream
wrong,
already.
as are you, but fine.
I'd have picked him, Joe. It's fine. I'm with you, mate.
All right, so I will go with Wayne Madsen. I had anyway, who has just racked up the runs for years at Derbyshire, was eligible to play for England for the vast chunk of that. I'm not sure he was immediately, but certainly has been for a long time. And tellingly, when we've done the Who's Who in previous years, so many players talk about what an incredibly talented ball striker, skillful player he is. So I think probably naturally being at Derbyshire, he's probably slipped under the radar more than he should have done. So he's definitely in there. And then as a replacement for Ed Joyce, I'm going to go with Daryl Mitchell at Worcester, who obviously churned them out over the years. Solid county opener. Very nice chap as well.
I couldn't be asked to pick my team, but Wayne Madsen definitely would be in it if I had.
As would Ed Joyce, you're saying?
As with Ed Joyce, yeah, but we're not allowed him apparently.
Ben, you picked Mitchell, but you went for someone else up top.
Yeah, Malloy. I wondered just obviously international played, but didn't play in a test match.
That's the rule. You're allowed to be captain in white ball cricket,
Yes.
but not.
But I guess I think that Madsen and Lloyd make a very attractive opening partnership in terms of
Lloyd
striking.
Lloyd didn't really open in red ball cricket. He was middle order player.
Okay.
Opened in white ball cricket.
Maybe we get both of them in there then.
Actually, and in more recent years, Madsen's been a middle order player as well, but he did start as an opener.
That's the thing. So I had Madsen in my team lower down the order, but I'm happy with
you're not
opening.
having Malloy.
Okay.
Cool.
I mean, you can make an argument for him at number 4, but I don't think he wouldn't have opened much in red ball cricket.
Let's go Mitchell and Madsen up top. Just a couple of other openers I thought were worth mentioning if we weren't going to pick them. Jimmy Adams at Hampshire had a really good career, averaged high 30s. Vikram Solanki as well, obviously played a lot for England in ODI cricket, but still very good county career.
He was very close. Again, I'd have probably gone middle order for him in red ball stuff, but yeah, he was close. Chris Dent as well.
Yeah, Chris Dent as well. Going to the middle order, David Sales and James Hildreth are the guys who make both of your teams and mine as well. Pardon?
Jumble. That's his nickname, David Sales. It's a good name.
Good.
That's all.
Ben, who do you want in the middle order aside from Sales and Hildreth?
Well, I mean, I suppose it'd probably be number 6 rather than number 5, but Darren Stevens just has to get into this team, doesn't he? I presume you picked him, Joel, or did you not?
Yeah, no, God, I definitely picked him. I actually had him at number 7 because my keeper is a very, very good batter, and I thought so. I had them that way round. But yeah, either or, 6 or 7.
So who's your keeper? Did you go for Ben Brown or Davis?
Steve Davis.
Yeah, that's what I went for as well. So there's quite a lot of agreement here. Then.
Yeah, just on Darren Stevens, I feel just the way Darren Stevens at the moment is used as kind of a like something to attack county cricket with. Is how's this guy who's 45 about to turn 46 doing so well? People just ignore his batting when they talk about him basically, and like we're looking at the numbers of most runs this century. He has scored 34 first class hundreds this century.
He was not too far away,
36.
I think, at the turn of the 10s. He was playing England nines then, and that was when England had, perhaps their deepest strength in batting. I mean, Ed Joyce wasn't getting in the team at that point when he would be a shoo-in at most of the times. So who did you have at your number 5, Joe?
I had Ali Brown as my number 5,
Interesting.
who I think I tried to work out, because he obviously played a bit in the previous century. I think he averaged about 42 in this century, proper player. Surprising that he didn't get a game at some stage. I know he was predominantly thought of as a white ball player, and obviously that was the format that suited his aggressive style. But as a middle order player in red ball cricket, he was a huge part of the Surrey side that won plenty of trophies. So he was in there for me.
I think he makes the team then. Again, a couple of guys I wanted to mention who don't make the team. Sam Northeast got a very good record over a long period of time. Chris Nash as well, very long career, done very well as well. But I think that's a pretty settled top 6. You mentioned that you both picked Steve Davies as your keepers.
I would have picked him too.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. Two names that I'd have thrown in the ring. One, Ben Brown, obviously, very good record. But also, this is a guy I would have picked, Craig Keyswetter. Averaged pretty much 40 in first class cricket.
It hadn't crossed my mind because we were looking at top run scorers, and obviously he wasn't in that list because his career got cut short. But that's a very good shout.
Yeah,
that is a very good shout. He played a couple of outrageous knocks a year or two before he had that terrible
He'd have played Test cricket, I think.
Yeah, he made a day 450 not out to win a clutch game for Somerset in a week or a month or a couple of weeks period where he's just making runs left, right, and centre. He made list 800 in there as well. Yeah, he could really play, and I think Joe's absolutely right. He would have played Test cricket.
A couple of other keepers who didn't get mentioned. They're not really strong competition, but Mark Wallace was a brilliant keeper and a very good batsman for a long period of time. I think he's got the record for most consecutive championship appearances. And another one who definitely doesn't make the team as a batter, but as a pure keeper, Keith Piper at Warwickshire.
Was he still going into this set?
He was, yeah. So I looked at, he was late. Yeah, he was up until about 2004, 2005. But
you like a Gloveman, don't you, Jack?
Well, my memory is that he was as good as Jack Russell was as a pure keeper. He wasn't as good as a batter, and his first class average is sub 20. So he
get Ben Scott in there, get him in.
Well, you could load a team and bat him at 9 as a pure keeper. Would be an option. It's not the one I've gone for because Steve Davis absolutely deserves to be in there, but he was one hell of a keeper.
So we're going Davies over Keyswetter?
I don't recall Keyswetter's work as a keeper being particularly well regarded, but he did hold that position ahead of Butler at the time.
They sort of shared, and that was why Butler went to Lancs.
That was why Butler left, because Keyswetter had the gloves.
I suppose it's tricky. It depends what you're picking this team to be. If it's sort of like a recognition for it, no, but if it's a recognition of many years of service to the county game that wasn't recognised by England, then you'd go for Davis. If you're picking the team that you think has the most chance of succeeding at the Test level, which I think will be an especially relevant debate when it comes to the bowling attack, maybe you go for Keyswetter. I don't know.
Yeah, England would probably have played Keyswetter more than they would have played Steve Davis. So yeah, let's go Keyswetter. It's a bit funky. I like it.
Cool. Then on to the bowling attack. Joe, a couple of 2 pace bowlers who made everyone's teams. I think you know who those are going to be. So do you want to say they are?
Glenn Chappell.
Oh, no, Tim Murtaugh's not allowed, of course.
Yeah, Tim Murtaugh's not allowed.
Although oddly, I hadn't picked him because I thought, I don't know why. My logic doesn't stand up. Anyway, let's move on. Let's not have the argument with myself now. So Glenn Chappell, obviously he bowled 4 overs in an ODI and then broke down injured. Never played a Test match, which is unbelievable. All the England seamers around at that time who got a game, it is extraordinary that he never got at least one. Yeah, there's not much you need to say about him really. Just metronomic. Took 692 wickets. A lot of wickets. And the other one, I guess, Chris Rushworth.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it my third seamer you want then?
So
tricky.
Chris Rushworth, 548 wickets at 22. Not a very controversial selection. So your third seamers are different.
So I was debating between two left armers. One who is actually playing behind me right now, Keith Barker, whose record probably 432 wickets at 25. Left arm variety, also averages just under 30 with the bat. So a really compelling case to be a number 8. So he was in my team, but now I'm thinking Mark Foote is another one who I actually had to double check that he hadn't had a bad test match for England and never played again, because he went on that tour to South Africa. Didn't go right for him. Lots of stuff apparently going on behind the scenes. Didn't necessarily bed into that international environment and never played again. But he was brilliant in Derbyshire. Had a very, very good year at Surrey as well. His record, 352 wickets at 26. And what my side is lacking, he was a genuine quick at his best as well. So I think I'm going to go him. Slightly weak in my batting, but go with him as my third seamer.
That's interesting, because I was quite prepared to concede Keith Barker to you, having picked Jack Brooks, because I guess there are quite a few who have. So David Masters is one who has sort of an incredible counter record, but you wonder if they just didn't have that nip for the top level, which I think both Barker and Brooks would have. But Barker's batting would have won him over Brooks for me, I think. But Foote had even more pace. I mean, how quick was he rumoured to have been? Because the thing with him as well is he was a proper strike bowler, wasn't he? He just took bags and bags of wickets. Even when he went for a few, he would basically invariably take wickets.
Quite a few injuries. I think early doors he was talked about as a genuine sort of very high 80s, even touching 90 miles an hour. I think he was probably more of a kind of 85 miles an hour when he got picked for the England squad. Sound about right, Phil, from what you saw of him?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it might have been his home debut at the Oval as well, when he made quite a big money move to Surrey. And I don't think it worked out for him on and off the pitch coming down to London. But he took 6 for in an afternoon that me and Matt Thacker, managing Ed at Wisden, we watched it together, and he was lightning, and he looked like an international bowler. And I think that South African tour might have been at the end of that
I think
summer.
That's right. Yeah,
and they were properly interested in him. It's a bit of a mystery as to what went wrong there with him.
He had a brilliant record at the Oval as well on a flat wicket, reputation for getting wickets on flat wickets. And I just find it really interesting with Foote that England got destroyed by Johnson in 13-14. Foote then basically has his career peak between the next two Ashes series, and by 2018, 17-18, that's when he leaves Surrey at the end of that. And it's quite interesting that,
he's sort of back in the day, it'd have been the one they bring in for a test at the Oval end of the summer, because they feel he suits those conditions, and he did. So I think he's a good pick.
No,
is there any way
like
to
that.
fit both Barker and Foote in? I guess probably not, but
You'd have to drop one of Chappell or Rushworth.
Which
and I
we're
think
not doing, yeah.
Nah,
Yeah.
I think Barker's your good backup.
Yeah,
Unless you didn't want to play a spinner, but we've got to play a spinner.
And Joe's gone for Gary Keedy as the spinner, and I was just doing my research on Gary Keedy, and on his Wikipedia page it says that he was picked in the All Out Cricket in October 2006 issue of All Out Cricket. He was voted the best ever county cricket player never to play for England, which isn't quite right, because I've got the issue here in front of me. It was
show it to the YouTube fans, yes.
You can say
It's a good cover story, that.
Wall on the front.
Very good cover story, that.
It was the best county cricketers at the time who hadn't played for England.
It's quite a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we should amend his Wikipedia page.
Yeah, definitely.
It does say citation needed, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does actually. On that, I looked at Keedy's numbers, and I reckon if Twitter existed in the early 2000s, there'd be a big Keedy must-play bandwagon. In a 4-year period leading up to 2006, he took 230 first-class wickets at about 24, 25. There must have been people saying that he should be playing ahead of Giles.
Well, yeah, and there were, but obviously everyone knows Giles was a good fielder at Gully and scored useful runs, and Keedy wasn't either of those things, and that's what sold it basically. I don't think there'd been much argument that Keedy was a better left arm spinner than Giles, right?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah,
I think that's fair. Certainly more attacking.
Ben, you've gone for someone slightly younger than Gary Keedy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm less persuaded by him now that we've got Foote in the team. We've got a proper strike option. But when my attack was sort of 4 sort of medium fast seamers, I wasn't hugely interested in a spinner who would just hold up. And I know Gary Keedy was very good, but he was a container mostly, as I understand it. So I went for Matt Parkinson as a leg spinner.
Shock
who can sort
and
of,
indeed horror.
Who could break the game open, bowling at the other end of your
He's
guys
played
who are
32 games.
No, I know. I'm
Didn't
aware.
Bumble put him in his all-time Lancashire 11 when he?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
So, this is only marginally more ridiculous, marginally less ridiculous.
I was basically thinking about what would that team want.
You were looking for a balance of side.
Yes, basically. That the attack that we had, I mean, with Foote less so, it would not go for many runs, but on flat wickets might possibly struggle for penetration, and that is where maybe Parkinson comes into it, possibly. I mean, I'm probably happy to concede Keedy, but I think
you're going to have to, I'm afraid.
One other spinner that sort of came to mind, Keedy definitely, I think it's the clear front runner, but Jason Brown at Northants as well. Very good. I wasn't sure exactly where his career crossed over the century, but very good record in this century. Went away on tour with England to India, I think, or Sri Lanka. A subcontinent tour, anyway, didn't play. And then Swan and then Panasar's emergence at Northants meant he kind of slipped out the reckoning. But for a while, he was considered to be a future England bowler. So not quite on the class of Keedy, but not far off.
So our team, Darryl Mitchell, Wayne Madsen, David Sales, James Hildreth, Ali Brown, Darren Stevens, Craig Keyswetter, Glenn Chappell, Gary Keedy, Chris Rushworth and Mark Foote. That's a good, very good 11. That is all we have time for on this show. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Ben. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We'll be back next Thursday, where we will be joined by Wisden Almanac editor Lawrence Booth to talk about the 5 Wisden cricketers of the year.